So I'm joined by Coinnleach MacLeod, who is the Hebridean Baker. Hi there, how are you?
Falshire, Rosalind, how are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah. If anyone's watching this in the video, we've just been talking about how much I look like a ghost. So yeah, it's a lovely autumnal Scottish day, which chucking it down. But what a nice atmosphere to be talking about home baking and your new book as well. So
Exactly. Think about it. Just like you're inside, it's all cozy, looking at the storms outside. So it's the perfect time to talk about Hebridean Baker bakes.
yeah. So for anyone that doesn't know, we'll just go right back to the start. How did you come to be the Hebridean Baker?
Well, I've always been a really passionate home baker, but I can't really pinpoint the moment when I decided to do it. I was over at my Aunt Bellac's house, my dad's oldest sister. She's 93, and she had a clootie dumpling bubbling away in the stove, and she was telling me she had made the dumpling, the clootie dumpling, or duff, as we call it in Gaelic, the same way for the past 80 years. And she was just telling me stories about traditions on the island. And I thought to myself, I want to make sure that people on the island don't forget these stories and recipes, not ever imagining that anybody off the island would be interested. And so I started creating wee videos and stories online. And I think now I've had 21 million people watch them. So I definitely know there's not 21 million people on the Isle of Lewis. So there's definitely a few people off the island who are watching them.
Yeah, so that's I mean that'll probably chime with a few people, and I know I've had um my cousin's gran. She used to make an amazing dumpling, and like she always, we remember her through like home baking, but we don't have that recipe anymore. So that kind of chime with a lot of people. So that was your starting point of like wanting to kind of keep these things alive, and then it came alive online. And at what point did you think, wow, this is really kind of starting to change my life?
It was kind of plodding along for a couple of months quite nicely, getting a few thousand views, which is still unbelievable. I didn't expect that. And then one morning I woke up, and the day before I had posted a video about making a carrot and cardamom loaf. And the next day I woke up to like hundreds of thousands of views, tens of thousands of new followers. I was like, okay, that was a good carrot cake, but it wasn't that good. And unbeknownst to me, and not until nearly a month later, Elle magazine, the American magazine Elle, the columnist had written a column, and it was when our old pal Donald Trump was trying to ban TikTok. And she had written a column. I think the headline was, "The only thing I'll miss about TikTok is the Hebridean Baker." And she basically wrote this big story about finding me on TikTok. And I think she said I sounded like what she imagined a piece of shortbread would sound like when it came out of the oven. And I just suddenly got this huge, huge American following after that. And it just kind of started to grow and grow. And honestly, Rosalind, the adventures I've had because of this have just been amazing.
Is there any one particular thing that really stands out from when it all kicked off?
Well, I was lucky enough to do an American book tour for my first book back in May. And I was walking down Fifth Avenue in New York, and I was with my partner, Peter. And he said to me, says, "I bet somebody will recognize you here." And I was like, no way, there's no way on Fifth Avenue in New York somebody's going to know who I am. Impossible. I'm not joking. Like, I would say not even a minute later, this guy shouts across the road, "Hey, Hebridean Baker, I love you," like that. And I was like, what is happening to my life? Like, rewind a year ago, people wouldn't have shouted at me, or they might have shouted at me in Stornoway, but not for good reasons. But now I've got people in New York knowing who I am. I mean, I've had so many amazing pinch me moments, and just constantly proud that I can, yeah, be it in Stornoway, New York, London, Glasgow, I've been able to promote Hebridean heritage and stories and culture and our recipes, and that's amazing.
And have you found as well that, so, you know, the stories and the heritage and thing, is that, have people been quite surprised by that in terms of like maybe they don't know, like is it been quite a learning journey for people? Because, you know, it's a real part of you and part of the book and obviously part of everything you're doing, but have you had any moments where people have been quite taken aback by that side of things?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, even just learning about the language of Gaelic, has been very interesting for people, and the the fact that it is still a spoken language is just it's my first language. I speak it every day, and I've been so proud that so many people have said, I've started learning Gaelic because of, you know, your stories or your book. And so that's fantastic. And even telling people about our history and the fact that the Hebrides were part of Norway for 400 years. And that's very much influenced my second book, because I decided to put a chapter of Nordic bakes in it, because we do, I mean, to put it into context, my island, we're closer to the south coast of Iceland than the south coast of England. So we do look north quite a lot and get influences in that way. So, and it is one of my favorite chapters in the book to do.
So how do you go about sort of developing your recipes and things? Is it stuff that you've I mean, in the book, there's some things that have obviously come maybe from your family, but like any sort of new things, how do you kind of start that process?
um, well, I have to say that again, I still just call myself a passionate home baker. That's what I am. So creating a cookbook is a wonderful experience. I learned that it's most common for a cookbook to have 100 recipes, but mine have 75 because they wanted me to have the stories and the beautiful photography in the book. But the first thing I did was kind of structure the chapters, and they're set around either a flavor or a key ingredient like whiskey or oats or something like that. And then from that, I must admit, I found it really rewarding, where I ended up having more recipes than I actually needed for the book. But they come from all areas of inspiration. You're right. Family and friends play a big part in this. And I'm always getting people going, oh, have you made this, or have you heard of this recipe? But I also love looking at old Scottish cookbooks. There's one from 1929 called The Scots Kitchen by F. Marion McNeill. And it's my favorite. I've always got it on my table. I absolutely love it. But I found another one recently, which is from 1829. And she, a bit like myself, she had a kind of alter ego in a way. She called herself Mrs. Dahlgrens, and she was born on Prince Edward Island in Canada, but her parents were Scottish, and she wrote a book, The Practice of Cookery, and it was for housekeepers who were starting, you know, maybe their first job at a new house, and it had 1,424 recipes in it. So I feel with 75, I'm a bit of a lightweight with only 75 recipes in my book. But I took my Caledonian cream recipe from that, and so I love doing that. And also, just as I said, taking a classic and just putting a Scottish flavored twist. One of my favorite things to do.
Do you have the same kind of reaction as I do when people talk about deep fried Mars bars?
You know, I've got to say, I have I have had one once, like quite a posh one. They made the marsh bar and then deep fried it. And I have to say, it was absolutely spectacular. But yes, you can imagine the amount of times in interviews, particularly if it's from maybe England or overseas, they ask me about deep fried Mars bars, and I'll stay positive, because it's still seen as part of Scottish cuisine, maybe even though it's not the part that we want to celebrate. But I think I hope you agree, Rosalind, that I think Scottish cuisine, Hebridean cuisine as well, or our food culture is definitely being celebrated more and more over these past few years. And that's fantastic. I'm very proud to be part of that kind of adventure we're having at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. The only time I've ever had a deep fried Mars bar was from a Chinese restaurant in Dubai, and it wasn't that nice.
I do not. Honestly, I've been tempted to try and make one myself just to see if how it would turn out. It's quite a skill, to
Yeah.
make the marsh bar and then keep it together in the frying process. But maybe for book 5, I'll leave that for a few years, I think.
So just to kind of go back as well, so you talked about the clootie dumpling, the recipe that's been going for 80 years, but do you have what's your earliest memory of food or drink, and how does it kind of tie in with your family? Because obviously that seems to be a big part of things.
Yeah, it is. It is a big part of it. And as with many folk growing up on the Isle of Lewis, life was very traditional. My father was a fisherman, so he would be out at sea for 5 days a week. My mother was a Harris tweed weaver, and so it was very much kind of our food was what we had around us. Either my father's fish or whatever he brought home. We grew our own vegetables and potatoes. I mean, being honest, I really remember only going into Stornoway, which is our main town. It's about 30 miles away, probably only 2 or 3 times a year. We didn't really, and it was an adventure. It's like going to Las Vegas, like going to Stornoway felt a big thing. And so from that, it really was what we could grow or what we had ourselves. We had about 400 sheep as well. So we had we would mainly have mutton rather than lamb. We would sell our lambs. So mainly just mutton we ate. So a lot of very traditional food, a lot of traditional recipes. But again, as all the houses had, there was a beautiful big aga in the kitchen, and kind of leaning over to see what was being made on top of the aga, be it pancakes or griddle scones or the clootie dumpling. And it really was all those classic kind of island recipes that I remember. So I've had to kind of grow my repertoire kind of over the past few years, but those are still my favorite ones to go to.
And kind of modern day as well, how do you kind of feel like obviously you've become really well known and people will probably come to Lewis and Harris as well to sort of visit and kind of experience it. And tourism has kind of obviously with COVID gone away and come back, and there's places like the Harris Gin Distillery, and it's becoming more and more of like a destination and a food and drink place as well. So how do you feel about that, and how do you feel about your part in it as well?
Well, funny enough, even I was on the ferry last week, and this lady tapped me on the shoulder, and she was like, "Are you the Hebridean Baker?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it still surprises me that anybody knows who I am. But she was like, "You're the reason I'm on this ferry. I've been watching your videos for the past, 2 years, and I've dreamed of coming here. And now I'm on my way, and you're on the ferry with me. Feels like, kind of it meant to happen." And that made me feel fantastic that somebody has, as I said, watched my videos or got my book, and it's inspired them to visit. I would say the island still has a bit to do to grow up from an infrastructure point of view for tourism, and it's getting there. I think the islands of Skye and Mull and Islay, they're more set up for tourism. So we're getting there. And you're right, there is some real destinations now for food and drink. The Isle of Harris distillery is just the most beautiful distillery. You walk in and they've got the peat fire on and they just welcome you. It's just a beautiful place to go. I recently was at a restaurant called Uig Sands, which I have to say was one of the biggest treats I've had in the last few years. A beautiful restaurant, the experience of walking in and having that full glass front onto the beach, and the food was just beautiful. So I think we're starting to see, I think we always had that rustic kind of coziness to our cafes and restaurants, but now we're seeing some elegance to our dining experiences coming as well, but also the way that people just love to go to a wee food truck. And that I don't use the word remote for the island, but definitely on the island there is I would say the most remote pizza takeaway place in the world. It's a shipping container on a croft in the middle of nowhere called Crust, and their pizzas are spectacular. So you have everything from a shipping container pizza takeaway to a beautiful fine dining restaurant at Uig Sands. So I think people will really experience now the different types of food and drink that we can give, which is great.
Yeah. Maybe want to go back. I know about a lot of these places from social media, but yeah, I've not been for a while. Um, so yeah, so we've talked a little bit about kind of folklore as well. So what for anyone that doesn't really know and hasn't really had a chance to look at your books yet, what would an example of like Hebridean folklore and food? What would you say that would be?
Well, you could imagine we have a lot of myths about monsters and things on the island, and we have lots of giants, we have lots of things who hide in under bridges and all those kind of things, but probably the one that scared us the most growing up was a Ekushka, and they're sort of our version of a Selkie, I suppose, in a way. They're maybe related somewhere along the line. And an Ekushka is a shapeshifter, and they will take the form of somebody that you would trust. So it could be a old granny, or it could be a handsome man, but they definitely have ulterior motives, to say the least. So in the end, they'll take you down into the loch, and you're theirs forever, kind of thing. So, but there's one story in my book about two sisters who welcomed this old granny into their house, thinking it was a friendly old granny, and she ate all their porridge and then ate them, which isn't the nicest story, but I think it was supposed to scare you away from talking to strangers. I don't know what it was, but so if you meet a friendly old granny when you're on the island, just be careful. Just be careful.
Or maybe it was to stop you from eating all the porridge as well.
Good point. It maybe was.
So just 2 seconds, Kelly, should we go into my life and food now, or is there anything else you can think from a kind of outsider perspective?
Oh, it sounds good. I think it's nice. Yeah, do my life and food. I suppose, anything coming up, what's plans, what's
Oh yeah,
that kind of stuff. Great. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So you've got your latest book, which I can grab and show on video in a minute. But yeah, what are your plans for the future? It sounds like it's been quite busy.
Yeah, the second book, My Scottish Island Kitchen, has just been released, and it's the adventures you get from having a cookbook released are fantastic. I'm currently on my UK book tour, and there it is. Lots of pictures of me looking wistful in kilts on top of mountains. I feel like remember that Scottish Widows advert, the lady with the big cloak? I kind of feel like that, but with tartan instead. But I will be heading off on my second American book tour in January. And honestly, Rosalind, every day I just get the most wonderful messages and emails and invites to do fantastic things. I did Martin Compston's travel show a couple of weeks ago, which is great fun. I just appeared on This Morning with Holly and Philip. So every day something fun happens, and I think that's the thing I'm most fortunate about, is the feedback of what I've done. To become Scotland's best-selling cookbook author last year was wonderful. So let's see if that happens again this year with the new book. But lots of fun things in my future.
Nice. And have you been, I mean, what were you doing before this? Has this always been something that you've done? Like, obviously now it's your full-time job, but is it gone from like, I don't know, what were you doing before all this kind of blew up?
My career was mostly in sport. I worked in sports development, mostly football. And so I traveled a lot overseas, which I think also has inspired a lot of what I do, because I've seen other people's perspective of Scotland. And as you say, trying to dispel those deep fried Mars bar myths, and make people want to try and see Scottish cuisine in a more positive way. And maybe as well, because of working in kind of brand and marketing, I love telling a story. And so the fact that I can now tell my own stories and stories about the islands makes me very happy.
And do you watch the Bake Off? And if so, do you have moments of like shouting at the telly?
I absolutely love Bake Off, but I do have a new favorite, which is Australian Bake Off. I don't know if you watch it, but oh my goodness, it is amazing. If anybody hasn't started to watch that, I think it's on like All 4 or the Channel 4 channel online. But Australian Bake Off it feels like it's back to the old days, the kind of cozy days of Mel and Sue and Mary and Paul kind of thing. But yes, that's my catnip, is Australian Bake Off.
Yeah, I feel like they do Australian versions of other things. That Married at First Sight always seems to be the most dramatic one. Everyone talks about me. Clearly, Australia is the place to be. So part of the podcast is a quick fire round of 5 questions about food, if that's okay. So if you can just tell me the first thing that comes into your head when asked questions.
Will do.
You ready?
I am.
Right. Whenever I'm hungry, I think of
Porridge.
Comfort food for me is
Lamb shank, mashed potato, and gravy.
my favourite childhood dessert is
it is apple crumble and custard.
my food heaven is
being in Italy, having the best tiramisu in a restaurant.
and my food hell is
Mushrooms, definitely mushrooms.
And finally, as well, I usually we do desert island jams, but something else that we ask is if you could sit down and share a quaich with anyone, whether they're dead or alive, who would it be and why?
So I have a real love of country music, and I've been lucky enough as part of my book tour to go to Nashville, which was a bit of a dream come true. So I think having a dram with Dolly Parton and sharing maybe a slice of clootie dumpling, that would be a wee bit of a dream come true. So let's go with Dolly.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, well, is there anything else that you kind of want to touch on or we've not really covered?
Well, as I said, the goal, I've got 3 goals with my books. And the first one is to obviously try the recipes. Even if you're a novice baker, my recipes are accessible, easy to make, and visual as well. So my books have all the photography and steps and how to do it. So try some of the recipes. Visit the Outer Hebrides Even if you're from Scotland, you're going to visit a part of the world that's going to really open your eyes. You're going to maybe hear the Gaelic language for the first time. Go to a ceilidh with a big burly Scottish Islander, whatever. You're going to have a new experience going to the standing stones at Coinnleach. So come and visit the Hebrides. And the last thing, and probably what a lot of us hopefully learned during the last few years, is just to maybe slow down a wee bit and enjoy the simpler things in life. I was doing this Danish radio show, and we were talking about hygge. Remember the trend of hygge a few years ago? And the radio presenter asked me, is there a Gaelic, what's the Gaelic word for hygge? And I was, when you're doing radio, you're really on the spot, so I was thinking, is there such a thing? And I thought, yes, there is. There's a beautiful word in Gaelic called blas, and blas means contentment or warmth. And we have a saying in Gaelic, Betty blas luas, which is there's a time for everything. So just slow down, enjoy the simpler things in life. And I hope that from my books, readers will do those three things and enjoy that.
Oh, that's great. I'm just going to ask that as if it was a question, so Kelly can cut it in. So, what would be your main three things to take away from your books? Kelly, what is the best way to ask that? What are your main what are your main goals and things that
what do you want people to take away from your books?
Okay. So what do you want people to take away from your books? And that's fine. Don't have to answer it again. Well, that was really, really lovely to meet you. Really lovely to chat to you, and I'm looking forward to trying out some of your recipes and seeing what you get up to next. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rosalind, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon.
Yeah, and hopefully we might come up with a really nice way to do it at Pride Mars Bar.
That's
or not.